Today, we're looking at a green ink by Papier Plume, Moss Green. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. There's timestamps down below so that you can skip around, but if you got the time, I would appreciate you if you check out the entire video. You can follow me over on Instagram, and if you're new here and like fountain pen ink reviews, I would remind you to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Viscosity Van Gogh with a medium nib. I wrote with it for a day and used it to take my notes for this video. This first writing sample is done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper in order to have some kind of standardization to look at. There's additional writing samples later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it came in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X 450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X 750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, but amazing amounts of shading. I don't even feel like it's going to be necessary to point out the shading that's going to go on constantly here. The extra fine is the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and yes, amazing, amazing shading. 10 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine and the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and great shading. 19 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show us a lot of color variation, and we get a lot of color variation. Tomoe River is no bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and it is shading very well up here. The extra fine is slightly darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and great shading the whole way through, 16 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, still great shading. Shocked by it being 31 seconds to dry because it doesn't look that much broader a line, it doesn't look darker, but it took almost twice as long. Scrubby for both show us tons of color variation, and we got tons of color variation. And Rhodia, no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, and some very nice shading all the way through. The extra fine is a little bit darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, and a very nice shading all the way through the writing. Not as standout as on the other papers so far, but it is very much there. 9 seconds to dry. Medium, darker than the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and that great shading is absolutely back. Very pronounced, very in your face. 14 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show us plenty of color variation because there is plenty of color variation. I agree with Vita. I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And this is the classic yellow and blue make green, except it's kind of a purple leaning blue. And it is a very bright, bright yellow. Yeah, very bright. The purple does leave a line immediately on the bottom, and that went straight in, which does make me feel that the purple is really going to be a hang-around type color. The one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water, and you see more of that purple has stayed in that line. Very little of the purple is moving, but that yellow is still very much on the move. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page and how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Really surprising looking at the highlighter how well it handled. This is absolutely a safe ink to use in a highlighting, note-taking situation. Looking at water, it's only breaking up certain parts, but it's really leaving that purple behind. The purple is really not moving. Now, pen flush does look like it's starting to break it up a bit more, but it doesn't look like it's really breaking it down and out of there. To be fair, I do see a very light line on the right side where it looks like it's breaking it free, but most of that purple is still very much there. The 1/3 bleach solution does completely obliterate it from the page, and just remember, if you do use a 1/3 bleach solution, rinse your pen with water immediately after. I test ink viscosity or flow by using a tilt test, and I'll link that somewhere here. And for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Put the data onto a bell curve or standard deviation for it to be easily understood. Papier Plume's moss green has a viscosity of 2.8, making it normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average all 6 of those numbers. Now, for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Papier Plume's moss green has an average dry time of 17 seconds, making it not just normal, but average. Instead of finding inks that look like Papier Plume's moss green, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went with a nice red, Diamine Crimson. The second writing sample is done on Monokake, TWSBI, and Moji paper. Here we're looking at that Monokake paper. I know that, even after, I'm just going to keep mispronouncing it. But we have no bleeding. We do have some ghosting. It's a thin paper. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen. It has that very nice shading we're used to seeing. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It still has some nice shading. Not as standout, but it is definitely there. 8 seconds to dry. Medium is much darker than the extra fine, darker than the stub. No feather spread, halo sheen. It does still offer some nice shading, but the tone of the paper is very much eating up a lot of the shading, so it's not as much. Now 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show us color variation, and we do get it in the writing. TWSBI notebooks. No bleeding, very minor ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and it still is maintaining some very nice shading. The extra fine is lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, yes, still maintaining the shading, not as there as it was with the first writing samples. 8 seconds to dry. Medium, quite a bit darker than everything on the page, with no feather spread, halo sheen, still has a very nice shading. 12 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both shows plenty of color variation, and we get plenty. And how about Moji paper? Well, no bleeding, very minor ghosting. Minor ghosting. And that was the medium that was ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, nice shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. Still has some shading, less shading than we've seen on any other paper with the extra fine. 6 seconds to dry. Medium, darkest on the page by far with no feather spread, halo sheen, nicest shade on the page. 8 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both do show us some color variation, and we do get it in the writing, and that is all that I have for the writing samples. So what do I think of Papier Plume's moss green? There's a little bit of a brown lean in this ink, which is quite interesting. Its shading is amazing, like camouflage. I really love using this ink. My goodness, to say it's good is not enough. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? It doesn't matter what you choose. It's going to look amazing, and it's going to shade awesome. It's that good an ink. I do new ink reviews every single day, so if you're new here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.